Let's get this started then, shall we? Beowulf's right hand reached over to his left side to firmly grasp the grip of the higher of the two swords sheathed there. In a single, fluid movement, the sword was drawn free and readied, his two hands locking around the grip like a vice. The metal of the blade was rippled, like the surface of a lake, showing some ancient means of production, and a certain mystic quality. This special blade stretched down over 3 feet to a fine point that gleamed as the light traced down it. Well met! Gawain's hand too pulled his sword from its scabbard. A pentangle of fire momentarily appeared on the back of his drawing hand as the sword was pulled free. The dancing flames, like the sun's corona, found their way down the length of the sword, searing over the golden crossguard and along the 3 golden rings embedded in its fuller, before emerging from the tip in a gleam of sunshine. The air seemed to carve around the weapon as it was readied and placed in the waiting stance. What an impressive sword! Beowulf came hurtling forward, his body moving surprisingly fast for the numerous weapons and furs that hung from his body. His first swing was wide and telegraphed, a massive cut that dug into the dusty arena floor as it was brought upward. It struck like any other telegraphed blow against the defensive strike of the noble knight, and offered a quick rebuttal. Gawain leaned in and placed his shoulder in Beowulf's chest, forcing the larger of the two back and taking the sword with him. That opening allowed Gawain to deliver a swift slash, aimed for Beowulf's vital point. It clashed, however, with a clang against the edge of Beowulf's sword, sending the Yates leader backwards a step or two. Beowulf readied and closed the distance with another swing. Gawain parried it with his sword's gentle tap, before switching his wrists and going for an eternal stab. The Danish warrior sidestepped it ever so slightly, and brought his blade around for another strike. The Knight of the Round Table looked at it coming and raised Galatine to meet it. A clang scratched out between the two swords, as force parted over Gawain's body and out over the ground. A pressure wave following that set dust moving about their feet. Beowulf did not relent here, pressing his right foot forward between Gawain's own legs and bringing another attack forth. Gawain, unflinching, adjusted his mystic sword and blocked it again, his knees buckling to account for the strength as he was pushed back. Another strike came and met the defending knight's blade, and another followed, meeting the same steel as the first. Beowulf's blue eyes looked down with a smirk to acknowledge the skill of his foe. Gawain, from beneath the last attack, thrust it upward and swung his arm down for a sweeping attempt. It struck Beowulf across the mail of his top and sent loose a gust of wind. The larger warrior found himself skidding 2 yards away, his heavy sword dropping to the ground at his side for a moment, as a faint warmth escaped through the rings of his armor, alongside a stream of crimson. I must say, your skill with that blade is unmatched. Thank you. However, you're not too bad yourself. Why, of course! I am Beowulf! The Northman charged, swinging his blade towards Gawain. It struck far harder as Gawain blocked it. A crack parting the ground beneath the warrior as his feet were just momentarily lifted from the ground. Slayer of Grendel! Beowulf's next swing struck as the effects of the first blow still had Gawain off kilter. The knight's blade was knocked unsteady for the first time. He stumbled back a step, and Beowulf was pouncing again. And his foul mother! Beowulf's third swing cleaved down at the ring again, before striking upwards, meeting the armor at Gawain's forearms. Galatine pitched backward, and the knight stumbled. The Knight of the Round Table had to quickly adjust his feet and ready again. However, his sword was still flung out of position, and yet another swing was coming. Leader of the Storm Yates! This fourth thunderous strike hammered into Gawain's chest plate, the knight's head jostling backwards, his hair flying about before he was sent shooting away. He was airborne for 5 yards before striking the ground hard and rolling an additional 5. Eventually stopping with his back turned towards the imposing Beowulf. Quickly, Gawain shakily picked himself up, grabbing Galatine tightly in his right hand as he did so. His armor creaked as he rose, Beowulf's eyes watching its movements from a safe distance, like a predator staring at his prey. You were holding back? Ha! little. I like a fair fight after all, but seeing as you have so much skill, I figure raw power is the way to put you down! With Gawain back to his feet, Beowulf pushed off, the several meters between them closing instantly. The Knight of the Round Table, however, met Beowulf's blade with a fierce clashing. The two swords sent a stream of wind out between them. Gawain's heels were dug back into the ground from his resistance as Beowulf looked up. A swift second swing came from his larger foe, his Damascene blade twisting through the air and attempting for Gawain. The knight blocked it with his own sword, sending the larger of the two blades flinging backwards and tipping the wielder with it. Gawain's left hand pushed from beneath his sword and into Beowulf's chest, knocking the larger Northman back another step and providing the swift turnaround for Galatine's counterattack. Beowulf's blade was met and sent toward the ground, its heft digging into the dusty floor and getting stuck. The speed of the movement sent wind past the Northman's head. His gaze turned to find Gawain's blade coming down again. Forced to abandon this sword, Beowulf pushed back, the slice grinding down the front of his armor. A clinging sound rang out as each linkage jostled and sparked. Gawain's strength cleaving the air, but not his foe. Runting did not fail this time, Unfair, but it's clear that I need to try something else. So how about this one? Swiftly, Beowulf drew another sword, this one from the lower sheath on his right side. This sword was old and gray-colored, the luster of its glory years having been taken away a long time ago. Scrapes and gouges lined its fuller, while leather at its grip was hanging in strips from wear. Despite that, it seemed to pull the air around itself, dominating the field of view no matter where it was positioned. This sword is nailing. I've used it in countless battles. It is one of the few weapons that can withstand my full strength. You break your swords with your own strength. Frightening. Beowulf charged, once more closing the distance with aggression and great speed. His first swing carved the air around it and struck with crushing force. Gawain's Galatine, however, took the impact, and the knight's arm shivered before the force parted over his body completely. Beowulf drew it back again and slashed outward, parting the air and aiming for the locks atop his foe's head. Yet again, however, Gawain managed to match the blade with his own, though this time the knight found his feet leaving the ground, and the impact carrying him off to the side. Another slash quickly followed, a switching of Beowulf's wrist allowing for a swift and smooth follow-through. Gawain brought Galatine around for another match, and found himself once more flung back, the sound of metal meeting metal ringing out through the air. The Norseman was back on the offensive instantly, viciously swinging across at Gawain's side. It was blocked yet again. However, the knight's body was thrown back another yard from the blow, his heels digging in to prevent yet another unwanted tumble. They swung in synergy this time, blade meeting blade in clashing strength. It was here the gap between them became evident. Galatine was pushed down by nailing, and Beowulf was able to push onward to the Sir Knight he was facing. A headbutt followed, crushing into Gawain's nose, breaking it and spilling crimson upon the polished silver of his chestplate. The knight stumbled backward in a daze, his eyes bleary from the attack. Beowulf drew nailing up and swung it around for a blow intending for Gawain's side. Indeed, it met its mark, armor there splitting at the point of impact. That breaking, however, cushioned the cutting enough so that it met flesh, yet did not sever the knight's will to fight. Gawain was launched across the arena, spinning to a stop on his side, cutting into the dust. Worry not, you can still yield, Sir Knight, Beowulf remarked, placing nailing over his shoulder whilst approaching. Each footfall kicking up dust, the blood from his wound seemingly of no bother to himself. And why would I do that? Gawain gasped, picking himself up from the ring. Blood coated his left side and spilled down from the cut in his armor. Yet he seemed worthy of standing, even now. This is just beginning to get interesting. It was here Gawain looked to the sky, where the clouds were clearing. Oh? And what's that? Beowulf grinned, leveling nailing again, his feet adjusting into the blood-stained dirt beneath them. Because now, it's noon! Gawain's eyes gave off trails of fire, and his grasp on Galatine tightened, the blade itself exploding with lustrous light. Beowulf, seeing this, readied. Gawain's frame burning forward. Galatine appeared above Beowulf's head and struck down against Nailing. The force was so great the Northman's knees buckled, and the blade he was holding bowed beneath the strength of his foe. The second swing from Galatine met Nailing, and threw Beowulf from the ground, his body flinging several feet back as the dust at his feet was sent across the arena in a bloody arc. The Northman recovered, and Gawain was already there, slashing with a quick stroke from the sister blade of Excalibur. It ground down Nailing's edge and sent a crackling boom through the air, once more tossing Beowulf aside. "You have slain many creatures, and boast of it." Beowulf's heels dug into the ground, and he nearly tipped backwards, barely resisting the might of his foe. "But you are not the only one!" Gawain's speed was surprising as he switched his wrists and struck from the side. Beowulf's sword reached out and stopped it, only momentarily as he was pushed away. "Demons, great knights, witches and hags, I have slain a fair few in my day!" The third strike threw Nailing aside. "You were so concerned with overwhelming me with your power, you did not expect my own, did you?" Gawain thundered forward, his foot leaving a crater and blowing back dust. Beowulf met the strike with Nailing head on, and watched as the blade shattered into dozens of shards that sprayed out across the battlefield. Galatine clipped him along the cheek as he was forced to dodge from its path. "Splitting Nailing? Only I should be capable of such a feat. Dragons, sea monsters, their hides failed to do so. But a mere swinging of your sword did. I didn't expect that," he replied while stumbling to the side, his blonde beard now a shade of crimson, as blood poured from the wound along his face. His blue eyes looked at the knight he was facing. Trails of sunlight seemed to rise from Gawain's body, his grasp on Galatine firm as ever, and his eyes keen. The capable knight was indeed even greater now, with the sudden growth he experienced. Beowulf undid his belt, the remaining swords falling to the arena floor with a clatter. "But a broken sword will not undo me! If my own sword fails me, my hands are all I can trust!" Beowulf hurled himself shoulder first into Gawain's core, moving just beneath a swing from Galatine. The knight's heels lifted from the ground, but he managed to keep balance. "You truly are a great warrior, Beowulf," Gawain growled, taking Galatine in a two-handed grasp. "But you are not taking victory from me today." The pommel resting beneath his right hand, an overhead swing drove the pommel down into Beowulf's back. His knees buckled from the strike, the dust below spreading out from the sheer strength. Beowulf's arms wreathed Gawain's waist, the force causing the armor there to buckle and bend. Another strike from above drilled into Beowulf's back. The Northman kept his footing, knees shaking from the strike. "Is that so?" With great strength and a growl, Beowulf lifted Gawain from the ground and turned to his side. The knight crashed back first into the arena floor from the suplex, his armor bending and creaking from such a blow. Beowulf looked up upon him now, blood dripping from his cheek and down through his beard. The Northman looked like a monster, drawing back his fist, ready to strike. "Who decided that? Because only I decide when I lose." Gawain thrust upward for Galatine. "Then yield!" Gawain thrust Galatine upward from his side. It cut through the linkages of Beowulf's armor and into his core, just to the left of his navel. Sharpened and keen, Galatine pierced even through Beowulf's back, its tip wreathed in the Northman's blood. Beowulf yelled, driving a fist down. "I will not yield!" Gawain's head turned to the side, cushioning the blow slightly, his bloody nose spilling further claret onto the dusty floor. "You will!" Gawain's voice bellowed, his arms thrusting Galatine up further. Beowulf's bulk, which exceeded Gawain's even in his armor, was hefted upward on the blade, the crossguard solely halting him from being pierced through completely. Beowulf gagged and winced, strength leaving him as he fell onto the crossguard of his foe's sword. "That's it. I'm finished." He ground his teeth together, blood running from his mouth and spilling onto Gawain's chest. Beowulf then fell off to the side, his wound spilling blood onto the dusty floor beneath him. "Well met. What a frightening opponent. Galatine was pulled free from Beowulf's side as the knight rose to his feet, the victor. It was here Gawain returned to the terrace where his allies were awaiting, wound trailing blood onto the polished white marble. Well done, Gawain! Arthur placed a hand upon his nephew's shoulder. Thank you, Your Majesty. You better not lose now, after beating me today! Beowulf shouted, limping his way to the terrace, where a group of warriors poured out to greet him. Now, those of you that made it to the end, check the bracket below.